Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's podcast. My guest this week came down to the studio for me to photograph him for a tie-in sequence he's doing for the next issue of the journal. And over the years, Wales has produced some exceptional sea trout anglers. My guest is no exception. I met him last year on his local river to record an earlier podcast. And as always, sea trouts podcasts have been so popular. So when he came down, I took the opportunity to record another. It's easy to see when chatting, he is obsessed with sea trout. Or in Wales, we call them suing. But in peak season, he fishes every single night because he lives just beside the river. He talks and goes into depth of his understanding of sea trout, his most successful flies and tactics, and how to make the most of tough conditions. Welcome to my chat with Rob Redman. Welcome back, Rob.
Thanks for having me back, Kev.
Yeah, it's been about 12 months, I think, since we did the last podcast when I came up to you.
Yeah, it was.
This wasn't exactly planned, but you came down now and we're in the studio and you did some tie-in for the next feature, the winter feature for the Fly Fishing Journal. After we've done that, we sat down now and we had a couple of bottles of speckled hen.
Yeah.
And then we decided then, why not do a podcast?
Yeah.
So I don't know whether this is going to be good news or not.
Well.
So how was your season been?
Yeah, it's been one of them seasons where it was a slow start, really dry, low water, and the fish were pushing in, but they weren't really coming in numbers. They were always staying back down in the estuary, so it was a case of just buying time, waiting until, fish turned up. I think I took my first fish, which was £7 in July.
I remember that, seen the picture of it.
Yeah, so that was the first fish I had. So he was a nice fish, multi-spawner, heavily spotted fish. So by what I mean there by multi-spawning fish, the more spots a sea trout's got on him, the more times he's run the system.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the...
I know a girl, she got lots of spots, man. You might know her.
Yeah, I probably do.
I didn't know that, more spots.
Yeah, so the more spots a fish has got, the more times he's run it. Yeah, so yeah, that is the reason anyway. So that fish that I caught is a nice fish, nice solid fish, the sort of fish you expect to catch that time of year.
Yeah.
There wasn't any numbers there. Obviously that fish, there wasn't a lot of fish in the pool at the time I caught that fish. I think the first bit of water we had in July brought the majority of fish in. I noticed there was a lot of smaller suing come in, so the smaller generation, the fish from about £1 to £2, plenty of them. So the first lift of water that we had, I went out fishing small flies. I had a lot of small fish, which was nice.
Until that rain came, I guess I thought it was going to be a repeat of last year.
Yeah, well, I was starting to wonder myself as well. It was looking very, very
dry
at the start, and a bit worrying really for the amount of fish that was coming in. There was a lot of guys complaining, about the numbers of fish that were coming in, and it was really, really daunting really. But it did start after we had that first flood. I think it pulled fish in, and then they were starting to come on station then in the pools, But the majority of the fish that I was catching throughout this last season, just being now, they were all fish that were running. So they were either fish in the heads or fish in the tail of the pool. They were never in the bodies of the pool, so in the main body. So
why was that then?
Just because they're running fish, I was catching them. So the most productive time for me, anyway, this season, it varies from season to season, but sea trout don't have watches, they haven't got times. They'll come on together. So sometimes you'll have a take and then you'll have another take and then nothing. They're usually the smaller fish. But when you bump into these bigger fish that are actually moving from pool to pool, they'll be more inclined to, be at the head, waiting to run. So the best time was...
So they'll either just come in or at the head, at the tail of the...
Yeah. So if that's the two movements. So as the tail there, you've got a fresh fish coming into the pool that's just run from the last pool. That's a place to try. And on the head of the pool, in the first hour of darkness, was the most productive. Because obviously sea trout and salmon, they'll both move between dusk and dawn. So, that's the main two times, dusk and dawn, where fish will run. And that's probably the best time that I was coming across them, really. I was fishing in the daylight hours, catching the smaller fish, but all the better fish were coming during the night time.
Yeah.
That's when I was bumping into the bigger fish. Obviously, right at the end of the season, I caught a good number of decent sea trout. I think the biggest one I had was about 7-8 pound in the day. Coloured fish, but still nice. He was more than welcome with the season that we've had. But
you probably caught more than most. Looking at social media, everyone was like doom and gloom, but you were ticking along and you were still catching fish throughout the time. I suppose at the end of the season, the conditions just were wrong. We had too much rain then, didn't we?
Yeah, I think what it is, if you wait for these right conditions, right, you'll never go out, because the way this season's gone and the way it's run, we've had rain all the time. The river's been fluctuating, and these fish, they're not going to stop for anybody, so you've got to get out and you've got to fish for them. And then it's a case of, for me anyway, past experiences. I've seen this through, I've fished from a very young age, right? And I've seen all these conditions. I know what level of water to go out on to be the most productive, and where I'm going to find fish during these hours, You
were saying you're out most evenings when in peak season. Do you find there's times where you're sort of afraid not to go out in case you miss something, so you force yourself to go out?
Yeah. Sometimes, for me anyway, the only thing that will deter me from going out fishing on a night will be if the water's too high and it's too coloured. If I haven't got visibility of about 2 foot, right, I won't bother.
At night?
At night. So, I'll go down, I'll have a look at the river and I'll think to myself, not really worth it, and I'll go home. But if I go down there, visibility's alright, still running high and fast, I'll still fish it. It won't put me off. You've just got to know then where these fish are going to be in these sort of levels. Sometimes I go out at the expense of not catching fish, if you know what I mean. Going out, experimenting things.
Yeah.
It's not always a case of going out and trying to catch some fish and getting disheartened because I'm not catching fish. I want to know the reason why I'm not catching fish on good nights. When them conditions, you'll get them conditions, right, where you'll go out and you'll think, oh yeah, it's great tonight, the conditions are right, weather's great, water levels are right, and you won't get a touch. And it gets you thinking, why? But I don't go away from the river thinking, well, I'll just go home because it's no good tonight. I don't think like that. I always go, I'll try something else. and it's always trying something else that always catches me fish.
What have you learned this season?
What I've learned this season is don't let the water levels put you off. You know, it's been a case of having to get out, or because the season is so short as it is, and it was even more shortened, further shortened by the way we had a really dry spell at the start. So technically, we've only had half the season to fish. You know, it's not a long time, is it?
The sea trout fishing season goes probably quicker than most because it doesn't really start till July, does it?
No. Yeah, you know, you get that June time where, and May really. May was the main time for big fish to come in. There wouldn't be much of them, but if you got out there and made the most of it, put the effort in, you might be rewarded with a good solid double-figured fish.
If there's water.
Yeah, if there was water. But really what we look for in a sea trout season anyway is, you know, small rises, but often. Do you know what I mean? Like, just so the river's getting topped up every 2 weeks, eh?
That's the perfect
condition. Yeah, that's the perfect thing to have in a sea trout river, where it just keeps them fish occupied and up on the fin. And keeping them up on the fin, you know, you go out then with a bit of confidence, you know, when you've got flow, flies are working, you know that them fish are getting plenty of oxygen. So if you can find one, then he's more often than not, he's going to lock up on you. So it's nice sometimes to get them lifts often, but everything seems to be changing, you know, it's nature's changing, everything's changing, everything seems to be coming later and later.
It does, yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, even fly life, you know, nature in itself, birds, you know, everything tells you a story throughout a season. And as things change, you'll notice that it affects a lot of things. It's like unsettled weather has a huge impact on fish and the way their behaviour is. And for me, it's like, you know, I do a lot of grayling fishing, as you know, as well. And if it's like unsettled weather for them, right? They just switch off, where people think grayling are very obliging fish. They'll take anything, but they've got to have settled weather. Everything needs settlement. Even a migratory fish that's coming up the river needs settled weather. If he's been in there for quite a while, he'll need settled weather to get back to his own self. I found as soon as July into August comes, right, these fish have got one thing on their mind, and that's to get upriver. And, you know, you've got to get after them then. You know, the rule of thumb, really, on most rivers are, if you're a tidal, you know, if you're lucky enough to live near tidal water, then them fish will hang around for a long period of time down there, because they haven't got no real rush as such to get up. Because obviously they don't really spawn until the end of the season. Your
local rivers are the Mawddach and the Winion. Have we fished any others this year? You were planning on fishing. David, did anything come off, no?
Yeah, I did fish the Dovey, the upper reaches of the Dovey. I had some success on the upper reaches of the Dovey as well. I fished, to be honest with you, Ceri, I fished multiple sea trout rivers throughout the season. Well, I try to anyway, depending on how the conditions are and if it's worth me going over there. I fished the Conway as well, which isn't too far. I'm pretty central, really. You know, obviously the South Wales rivers are a bit of a trek for me, but the North Wales rivers. So I've got the Dee. That's not too far away from me. The Conway, the Dovey, as well. I've got the Ystwyth as well. If I want to go to the Ystwyth or the Rheidol, they're all good rivers. But obviously we can't do them all, and that's why I fish what's on my doorstep. Not because it's a better river than anywhere else. It's just that it's on my doorstep, and really, as a sea trout angler, that's your own backyard, and that's perfect. Where you fish.
Yeah, it's perfect really for you. You can just pick and choose if the weather's not right or the conditions aren't right.
Yeah.
Even if you just get to the water and you think, no, it's not far to go.
Yeah.
Or if someone else is in your pool, that can't be much fun when you know it's good. Tell me the story. Remember the story you told me earlier on? Tell me that.
yeah, so it was a typical night, great sea trout night, you know, the temperature was right, water levels were right, checked them tides, everything was spot on. And I'm glad sometimes I listen to my instincts. So what I did, you know, I put the alarms on. So I go for a bit of a nap before going out, because if I've got to work or something the following day, or I need to get up for something, stick the alarms on. And
So you come home from work?
Came home from work.
Have an hour or two?
Yeah. Have an hour or two, put the alarm on, but obviously I slept through this alarm and got up an hour late, so I got up and I didn't know where I was, and I was like, oh God, you know, am I going to go or not? And I thought, yeah, bugger it, get out there. So I got up, got all my waders on, my rod was already set up, I had the flies on because I knew what I was going to do. So I got down to the car park, walked down, rushed down.
So you keep your rod set up all the time?
Yeah, my rods are set up, you know.
That's cool, yeah.
Yeah, throughout the whole season, really. I'd never break them down. You know, change the leaders, obviously, but don't, you know, put the right flies on. But I got down to the pool, 2 guys on it, and I was like, oh, God, left it too late, I thought. So I shouted over to them, any good, boys? Turned around, they said, no, rubbish, I wouldn't waste my time, they said. I was like, I'm going to try it anyway, because I'm here now, and that doesn't mean anything to me because they haven't caught, like I thought. So I got in the water, got in the head. Within 2 or 3 casts, right, bang, this fish hit me. And what a fish it was as well. It came out the water, and it was like somebody throwing a cow in off the other bank. Boosh! A hell of a deep splash like that. I knew that this was a big fish, you know, with the depth of the splash. And he took off down the pool, and I couldn't put anything on him, right? I had to get after this fish, and he just kept going. He passed these 2 lads, and I said, move out the way, boys, he's passing you. And I grabbed him, I had a firm grip on the rod, and I was, you know, because he was pulling so much line off, all I remember was putting my hand round the spool of the reel and trying to stop it, and it was just burning, and he kept going down like this, and I couldn't see it obviously, but I could feel, and I heard that backing loop going through, ding 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 ding, and I knew then I was into the backing, and I thought, oh no, that's it, like,
yeah.
And I thought, oh. So I carried on going after him, and I thought, and the next thing, crack, I thought, what was that? And everything went loose, and I thought, oh, I've lost it. But what happened? The backing had snapped.
Oh, that takes some doing.
It does, yeah. But what I found out, and it was a schoolboy error really, I never checked the backing, and it had rotten inside.
Yeah. And
I should have checked this, you know. I should have stripped down my my reel after the previous season and checked it, but I never.
No one would.
No one does, do they? And this happened, and I was like, oh God. So I don't know where the reaction came from. Switched the light on, dropped the rod on the floor, and grabbed the line and started handlining it around my hand.
You found the backing?
Yeah, I found it. Well, I found the end of the fly line because I could see the colour of the end of the fly line.
Right.
So that's what stood out in the light. Grabbed it, and I thought, oh, I could still feel this fish, and he was gone. Oh, I was gutted.
So you wrap using your arm as a reel in effect then?
Yeah, my arm out straight, well, to an angle like that, and I was just wrapping it around my fist, like trying to get, because this fish, I was like, this isn't getting off. He'd been on for so long, and I thought, right, that's it. And then he came off, and I thought, and you know that feeling when you just lose a fish. I was shaking like a leaf, and I thought the adrenaline was so high, and I thought, I'm just gonna have to go home now. You know, it's finished. The night's finished. And I just sat down on a bank, and I thought, yes, I know what I'm going to do. I stripped the backing back down to where it was solid, the backing, and I had a good grip on it, and I knew it wasn't going to snap again. Tied the fly line back on, set myself up, put my flies back on, got back in the same spot, and I was into an 8-pound fish almost instantaneously after. And I was like, you know, it just went to show, you know, don't
take some doing.
Yeah.
To just pick yourself up.
Yeah.
After losing something special like that.
Yeah. I just didn't let it pull me off, you know. Some people would have gone home. I don't know, it's something was telling me, you know, there was more fish there to be had.
Yeah.
And they were on at that time. And I got back in, but they were fish that wanted it, you know. You know, they were putting that fly in their mouth and they were gone with it. And yeah, after that night,
I bet those guys didn't know what you were doing.
Well, they just looked at me and they said, "Oh, you know, I can't believe it. You've had 2 fish like that in almost 4 casts, you know, and you've only been here 30 minutes." And all I said to him, "That's sea trout fishing," and that's sometimes how it works. And you know, there's no rhyme or reason why these things work. In sea trout fishing, the only thing I can ever say to anybody is you make your own luck. You know, a lot of things will just fall into place. You'll turn up on the riverbank, you'll cast out, oh, I'm into a fish. But at the same time, you've got to ask yourself, why have I just got into that fish? You know, there's so many things and minute adjustments you can do if things aren't working. So when these things aren't rosy and these nights are hard, and you haven't picked the fish up and you know the fish are there, you've got to just change something sometimes. And by changing things, you get that small bit of a reaction and it gives you that intelligence then to go forward. And I think through my whole life of fishing so far, all my past experience goes on past intelligence. So what I mean by that is, you know, everything that happens on a night, since I was about, I don't know, 18, say, I've written everything down in a diary.
You keep a diary?
Yeah, I keep a diary of conditions and methods that I've used. So I keep writing all this stuff down. And it helps because it won't be exactly the same, but it'll be there or thereabouts, you know. Keeping these records, reading data of what you've done, because all I found was I tried to do it without a diary, and you can never for the life of you remember what you did to the exact. And I write everything down, so the length of my leader, you know, the distance I've got between flies, the weight of my flies in that certain pool at that certain time. I go back there and I do exactly the same thing and I catch more or less, you know, obviously you're not going to catch the same fish in the same spot, you know, but he'll be there or thereabouts. It's just that you've got to keep, and I think that's what makes it.
I noticed on your flies, like you've got your own twist on most flies, and these like spider patterns you've got, you know, there was a lot of movement in them. And I was noticing, you know, we were looking through John Graham's flies he gave me before he passed away, and I could see you were like looking through them and studying them. Yeah. Do you actually use standard traditional flies, or do you always like to push the boundaries and try and make them even better?
You know, every fly that you fish should have a purpose and should serve a purpose. You know, there's no point in tying a fly because it looks nice. You know, I know a lot of tyers, right? They tie flies and they're lovely and they're great tyers. But if it's a fishing fly, for me anyway, you know, it's got to suit purpose. You know, I've always tied flies that'll fish in certain conditions. And like you said there now about the Spider series of flies that I bought out, they're to suit low water conditions, you know, what we're mostly greeted with throughout a sea trout season. These flies were designed to fish in low water for the movement in them, you know, to trigger these fish to take. And sometimes I fished pools and I'm thinking to myself, how can I fish this pool, this low water pool, without spooking the fish? And, you know, when the water's low and you've got a lot of residual light left in the sky, and you're thinking, these fish can see my fly line, you know? You're lining these fish with a line, and you're thinking, how can I get a fly and get a presentation that's going to get these fish to take? So it was always, for me, these flies came into their best, had a down and across or directly downstream cast onto the fish, showing them the fly, obviously before the leader or anything. So this is where they work best. You know, sometimes with
fast water, high water, they don't get the time. Specifically for low water, where they got more time to see.
Yeah. Well, they'll work. Do you know what I mean? They'll work in most conditions if you can get the fly to the fish. But when they're at their best is in low water. So when that fly is coming down, you know, our fish.
And it's quite sparsely dressed as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's to suit its purpose as well. They'll get down a lot quicker, but they're still carrying that movement as well.
Yeah, with the lengths of the hackle.
Yeah, and what that does is changing profile, silhouette. You know, it keeps changing, and it's there in front of them, and it's just pulsating there. And for me, food memory, shrimp, you know, it keeps changing. And they're looking at it, and they think, sometimes you can hang it. I'm sure, you know, I can't see what's going on under there, but from what I can gather, you know, I've put it through a shoal of fish before, and it'll just nip. You know, they don't really want that fly. What it's doing, it's getting on the nerves. They'll keep nipping at it, and people like strike and keep striking. But to me, on nights like that, you won't catch them fish because they'll keep nipping. That tells me they don't want it, they're messing about there. So that when I bring that fly across, I think to myself, I'll just leave it there, and then I'll just give it a small figure of 8 back, and that's where they lock up on it. They'll just mouth it. I know that they're lethargic because, you know, the lack of oxygen, because they're with them flies, they're always hooked in the lip or very lightly hooked.
With those flies?
With them flies, yeah.
What, on the roof?
Yeah,
the top lip.
Yeah, either in the roof. So what you need to do, some fish I've caught, they'll be hooked in the lip or in the roof of the mouth, like you say. That's purely because I've not felt the fish quick enough. I've struck and I've hooked him in the lip. But ideally, if I get a good pull off him, I'll try and strike down into my own bank, so I'm pulling it straight into his scissors if I can. So by doing that, you know, you get a better hook set on the fish. So
something we spoke of earlier on about almost like a sixth sense.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm fishing slow, like when you're fishing like a team of nymphs or buzzers, when you've got a fair length of line out and you're fishing, just keeping in touch with the line more than anything.
Yeah.
And then you strike because you think there's a fish there, and there is.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's not a take, but you can actually feel the weight of the line. There's a little bit of weight which is different. And you were saying you experienced that this year quite a bit.
I've experienced this with a lot of different fish species. So in the way of sea trout now, it's hard to explain this sort of take, if you like. You know, you try and monitor your line at night as good as you can. You know, even at the darkest of times, you know, you're trying to monitor your line, where it is or how far away you think it is from the take zone or where the fish are. And something changes in the drift. And you just know sometimes that fish is there. And you lift, yeah, the fish is there. And it's you kind of knew that it was going to happen. And you felt something like a tension or a slight change in the drift, and you just lift. And I've had that experience with a lot of things. It's the same if when I'm nymphing as well. Because when I nymph for grayling or brown trout or something, you know, you'll come along, there won't be any indication off your indicator or anything really. You won't see anything, and you just give it a quick strike. Oh, there's a fish there. But you know, these fish will sometimes, flies are coming along, they'll just put it in their mouth, right, and spit it out as well. But if you're not quick enough to react to these slight changes or minute changes in your drift, then this then becomes, you know, the difference between converting takes into fish on the bank, you know. And for me, you know, that's again this season's been like that, you know, where fish have been very not too bothered about aggressively taking the fly, but you know, that's how the season's run as well.
Will you concentrate on tying flies now, I guess, through the winter?
Yeah.
I know you said you've already started on the grayling, but do you sort of psychologically now you think you put sea trout to the back of your mind? Or you're always living and breathing it, really? Like?
Yeah. What I try and do is get my grayling flies out the way, tie them first, and then I'd say when March comes, really, I start to look at then sea trout flies again. Start to get my boxes together, get flies in order, get all the flies that I need for that season, because being prepared will always be the best way forward, really.
If you're enjoying this podcast and want to listen to more, please consider becoming a patron, where you will get weekly podcasts plus access to over 150 past episodes, plus behind the scenes photography. Perfect listening over the winter nights. By listening to this episode, you're probably into sea trout. By joining my Patreon for just £5 a month, you can listen to Rob's first podcast episode, plus other sea trout expert guests such as Alan Rees, Jamie Harris, Italy Griffiths, Cyril Fox, and the legend himself, John Graham. To sign up, visit patreon.com/Casting with Ceri Jones or visit my website, castingwithcerijones.com. When I fished to do the end of last season, you took me on this one stretch, and I was surprised how light it was because it was quite near the there's like a bypass, a dual carriageway. And we had fish from that pool. Do you find that it makes a difference how much light there is on the water?
Yeah, it's, for me, it all depends where we fish. So, fishing near a road or where there's any sort of light pollution, where there's any built-up area, there's always going to be a lot of light. So these fish, once they've been in the river quite a while, they'll get used to this certain light, and it doesn't really seem to disturb them or put them off. They just get used to it.
I suppose it's nice to be on certain stretches of the river, like you mentioned, the Dovey and the upper reaches.
Yeah.
When there's the real remote stretches where there's no light.
No.
It's quite nice to fish those sort of places, I guess.
Yeah.
More stealth you need, I guess.
Well, more, the upper reaches of these rivers, are always very remote. So there's hardly any light. It's you and the fish and running water, and dark. It's dark on another level in these places sometimes.
Like Bible black,
Bible black. Up right at the upper reaches of some rivers, right? There's hardly any light. You hear nothing. Not a car, not a light, nothing, no road anywhere. And you just feel, it's kind of that spooky feeling sometimes, like I've had that when I'm sea trout fishing. You think there's someone standing behind you, or you hear something, but it's just hardly anything,
Over the years now, over recent years rather, you have made a name for yourself as probably the number one, I would say, sea trout angler in the country. No, I got to say it. There's not many people I could say catches as much as you in a regular consistency. You're obviously on top of your game. Have you ever thought of doing any travelling and fish other international venues then?
Yeah, it's always come across my mind to travel, go to these places where, like the Rio Grande, we can go and fish for big sea trout there. But in all fairness, I think by the way I've fished over the years, obviously there's a lack of fish in Wales and all over the UK, to be honest with you. Now it's sea trout and salmon are a bit scarce, and what it's done, it's given me more experience and knowledge about the fish, because I've had to work that much harder, to catch these fish.
Interesting to say that, because when I spoke to the late John Graham, he thinks that anglers today are better anglers than when he used to fish. Right. It's because there's less fish.
Well, yeah, you've got less of an audience, haven't you? But, I grew up in a time, Kev, when, the fish were just starting to dwindle, right? And, I do vaguely remember the shoals of big fish that we used to get in, right? But because of the way my mindset was when I started consistently catching sea trout, I had an audience of fish and I was able to, experiment, put things by them, run things by them, just to see how they'd react to things. But some people, they'll turn up, they'll fish the same pool, fish the same flies, fish the same line, right? And go from there and say, oh, the fish aren't on or something like that. But because I fished with an audience of fish, I was able to experiment. So not a lot's changed in the way of how the fish think and behave. The only thing that's actually changed is obviously the amount of fish that we've got to play with these days. So for me now, it's more of a hunt for a fish. And when I found my fish and I know he's there, then I can work then to him, and I can actually. Then that's what's been enabled me to adapt on intelligence and being able to actually successfully intercept these fish regularly and consistently.
As we started off on our chat, we said, how was your season been? What are your most successful flies this year?
So, obviously, at the start of the season, we were greeted with low water conditions. So, as you know, as I explained before, my spider flies work well in low flows, low river. They come into their best. So at the start of the season, my spider flies, so, like the PR night spider, I caught a 7-pound fish at the start of the season on a PR night spider. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of fish about then, but as it was low water. Presented my flies in the correct manner to this fish. Obviously, I didn't know the fish was there at the time. I was just prospecting through the water. Came across the fish, but I was fishing the tactic that I know that works in that certain pool at that certain time. And as well, another fly that did well early season, and to be honest with you, throughout the season, fished as a dropper fly was the Muscovy that I featured in the Fly Fishing Journal magazine. Great fly, it works well, not just for its movement, profile and colour, throughout the back end of the season as well.
Right.
I've always, as a rule of thumb, I've fished red as a back end fly, only because I find that shade stands out better to the fish. So it's more of a drab shade of red. It's not bright. It's drab coloured red, so like a scarlety colour. And obviously these fish, I don't believe they see much colour, to be honest with you. It's the lightness of shades. So shades of black and white they see. So as they're fresh in, blue seems to be the colour. Light blue seems to be the colour when they're fresh in from the sea, because their eyesight they lock onto these lighter colours start of the season. Because with sea trout, same with salmon, the longer they're in the river, the more their eyesight deteriorates. So, as their protein reserves start to run out, and the longer they're in the river and in fresh water, obviously then their eyesight gets less and less and less. So that's why at the start of the season you can get away with fishing very, very small flies and summer flies for salmon and sea trout. But then as the season goes on, you've got to go bigger because their eyesight is getting lessened. So that's why, I
didn't know that.
Yeah, so I'll always fish, bigger at the end of the season as well. So as well for the sea trout as well as salmon.
And gone into the red.
Yeah, and into the red coloured flies as well.
So what has been your main fly line, you can say? Of course, most of your...
Well, I mix and match my fly lines up. I carry multiple sink rates with me, so the fly line I get most use out of and I utilise quite a bit is probably just a floating line with poly leaders or fixed fly lines with sink tips.
Yeah.
And then I'll mix and match my flies off the end of that, to get the weights. Sometimes I get good use out of an intermediate line, this all depends. All this information.
You use an intermediate, yeah.
Yeah, I'll use an intermediate. Like, if I've got a wide river in front of me where there's a good flow to it, Not much drop-offs or obstructions, and it's uniform flow. I think then the intermediate line comes into its best when
Does it drag the fly more then, though?
Yeah, this is the problem with intermediate lines. This is why
you can't mend it, really, can you?
No. So as soon as you've cast an intermediate line out, it's sinking as soon as it hits the water, really. And if you've got any fish near you or near your feet, which sometimes you have, they're not going to see the fly. All they're going to see is a dragging fly in the deck.
Yeah.
It's not effective, but it is effective in some spots. This will only apply in certain rivers because obviously every river's different.
Yeah.
The flow and the characteristics of certain rivers are completely different. So, even methods sometimes won't apply. It's like you can read as many books and stuff as you like about sea trout fishing, but them certain methods that certain person used in that certain pool does not apply to your river. You've got to make your own way and your own path in sea trout fishing. And that is the best bit of advice that I can give anybody, is to, do your own, be your own person and make up your own
and stick to
choices.
One river to start with, I guess.
Yeah. Stick to that river, learn your river. And once you've learned that river and learned the behaviour of the fish, more so learn the behaviour of the fish. After that, really, you've just got to learn the structure of different rivers, And
I suppose it's having confidence, knowing there's fish there. I remember when I came up and with you last year, after we had the nights fishing, you went home and I slept in the van beside the river. And in the morning, I must have been, 6 o'clock, whatever. I just walked to the bridge and I looked over, and there was one big salmon, about 2 or 3 sea trout, probably about the 4 or 5 pound, and it was about a dozen, maybe not a dozen, but it was 8 to 10 smaller fish.
Yeah.
And then about 2 hours later, I went back.
Yeah.
And you couldn't see them.
No.
And I don't think they probably moved from there, upriver.
No.
They probably just in certain places where you're not likely to see them.
Yeah. And this is what, a lot of guys, they'll... I'm not one for doing it, really, because I just tend to know if there's fish in a pool, if there's fish not. At a certain time of year, they should be there. You go out scouting for fish, having a recce, having a look at... There's nothing wrong with going out and looking at the water and, having a bit of a recce but when you're going out looking for fish, you can go to a pool and you can see nothing. You look in there and you think, there's no fish here. But that then will put a lot of people off from going to that pool. But I'll go to a pool and I know there's fish there, and all I've got to do, stamp my foot, boom, 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 like that, where I think fish will be lying, and they'll answer me, and they'll boom, boom, boom. That's all you'll hear back. So if there's any rocks or anything in a pool where it undercuts the bank, where fish can stuff in, and they can get into the roots or whatever, you get above them fish where you think they are, and they'll tell you they're there because they can feel vibration through the floor, and they can feel that straight on the lateral line. And what they'll do, because if there's a few fish there, they'll start darting about underneath, bumping back, so they actually answer you to say, yeah, I'm here.
Jeez, that speckled end is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
You talk to the fish.
Yeah, so there's little things like that will tell you there's fish present in a pool. But the biggest telltale is, you'll arrive at a pool just as dark comes. You'll sit there, and then the next thing, whoosh.
Yeah,
whoosh.
yeah.
People have actually said to me, why do you think sea trout jump? At first, at that light, when that light starts to fade, why do you think they move? There's 2 things, right, with sea trout fishing. When you arrive at a pool and you hear that fish crash, and then there'll be another one crash. A lot of people will ask, why do they do that? Nobody actually knows why they do it, but through my experiences, obviously these sea trout, like I just explained with thinking there's no fish in pools, they come out to their daytime light and they'll come into the middle of the pool and they'll all be swimming around each other, right? And sea trout at night have got their own lies, right? And if there's anything,
They're making their mark.
they're making a mark, right? And they're saying, that's my spot, right? And that's what that fish is saying. He'll jump, push, get out of my spot. That's one, right? That's one example. The other example is, if there's a fresh fish just come up through the run and into the pool, then that's upset all the other fish in the pool. So they all start, getting up on the fin, start jumping around, like, because they're all fighting for these spots, and then it'll all go quiet. And then you won't hear a fish then for a long period of time. You might hear the odd,
and
you might hear the odd fish, jump. But afterwards you'll very quiet, and you'll think, yeah, right, now's the time I get in. Once the fish have settled, you wait. Patience is the main key, right, before you start fishing. And having that patience to wait until them fish are totally settled. And then you'll just creep in very quietly, because I've always found, right, these are very, obviously they're brown trout, right, and I fish for a lot of brown trout. All they are is sea run brown trout. And you'll enter the river, they know you're there. Soon as you get in that water, unless it's running water, you can get away with it. But if it's a still pool, my advice is stay out the pool, because as soon as you put your foot in, they know you're there, and you'll get that sense like you've upset them. So, in all fairness, like if I'm on tidal stretches where I've got to cast a fair distance, I'll always have to wade like to get to the fish. But the biggest problem is, once we're coming up the system, obviously then we're greeted with more gravel, right? And gravel starts to build up. So then you get in that crunch when you get in the water. They can hear it. That vibration sends straight to them. But when you're down on the tidal, it's more sediment bottom, clay bottoms. So you're a bit more quiet and stealthy when you get in. And that's a massive key to me, is stealth. When you're fishing higher up, don't be wading in, and starting to fish. Think about what you're doing. Let them fish settle, and once they have settled, then you take that very subtle approach to the fish.
So often you'll wait until the crashing stops.
Yeah, wait until that crashing stops. If they're jumping about, don't get in, because all you're going to do is disturb them further than what they disturbed already. And this is all...
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, it's all behaviour. Learning about fish behaviour. And I've studied them, these sea trout, and suing, we call them. Studied suing for a long time. Their behaviour. How many times, right, I've gone out, just walking the riverbank, no intention of going out fishing and catching them, watching them. You can stand there. I go back a few years ago now, when we used to have shoals of fish, I used to sit there for hours, creeping up on them, watching their behaviour, how they react to different things, or there's so many aspects to why they do things, and that's why I find that the fish are very interesting. There's nothing that compares to sea trout fishing, and that's because they're so emblematic, and so secretive. They're very, very mysterious.
Yeah. Interesting you saying, first of all, you said sea trout and suing.
Yeah.
When I was speaking with Illtyd,
yeah,
I don't know if it's the same across different rivers, but specifically on the Dyfi, he said, any sea trout, any suing,
yeah,
up to £3, they call a suing.
Yeah.
Anything over £3 is they call a sea trout.
A sea trout
on the
yeah.
Dyfi.
Yeah. Well, it's the same. Yeah, it's all North Wales, and Mid Wales, South Wales, they call them all suing, I believe.
They do, don't they? Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I've always, that's been my rule as well, same as Illtyd stated there, it's always been a £3 fish or above is a sea trout. Anything below is a suing. So,
yeah,
a lot of them schoolies, we call them, they're all suing. So
it's fascinating stuff. I love learning new things, and I've definitely learned stuff tonight now. If you could sum up then your top 3 tips for anyone fishing for sea trout,
Yeah.
what would it be?
So my top 3 tips would be, control and line management, the depth of your flies and your fly choice is very crucial, right? Because there's a fine balance between your line and your flies, right? And to get that balance, you need to be always trying to mix and match these balances to get that reaction. And once you get that reaction, you've got something to go on. So that would be the second one. And then probably the third bit of advice is having the right profile and silhouette for the depth of water you're fishing. So I'm a big believer in the silhouette of your flies and changing silhouette in flies. There's no point sometimes having one fly with a pronounced silhouette. It's always good for change in silhouette, for the fish to see 2 different things. So that would be my 3 tips there. That's always kept me in good stead.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and talking about sea trout fishing is more enjoyable, I find, and it brings a romance to it. And while you're talking, you imagine yourself by the river in the dark, and you're hearing that crashing and that, and this season is the first season in, as far as I can remember, I haven't fished for sea trout. So next year now, you've given me so much incentive, and instead of leaving it till the end of the season, which the last few years I have, we'll have to try and get together and have a few evenings, nights next year, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that as well. It'll be good to reconnect and have a good night fishing again.
Yeah,
it's always enjoyable. I always look forward to it, and it never gets old. The feeling of going out sea trout fishing. I never get really tired of putting my waders on to go out. Sometimes you go, I can't be bothered tonight, but I always go out with the attitude of tonight's the night again. A good bit of advice that I've always found and to give and to tell somebody is be the fly, right? In sea trout fishing, because everything is pitch black, we've got sometimes nothing to look at, right? So you've got to, sometimes you might as well shut your eyes some nights, it's so dark. You've got to be the fly, and you've got to imagine, as soon as you've cast, right, you've got to imagine how that fly is fishing, and imagine how that fly is getting presented to the fish. So always imagine and try and have that imagination of how your fly is getting presented to the fish. And that always has been key to me, because sometimes a lot of guys and a lot of anglers will relate to this now. Before you actually get that take, you knew it was going to happen. You knew that fish was going to intercept that fly, and you were ready for it. And that's what I mean by being the fly. That fly's coming across, and you're like feeling it round into the current, and all of a sudden, even before that fish touches it, you're ready to set that hook, bang, and he's on. And that's being sharp. And being sharp will always catch your fish. Converting takes into fish on the bank.
Being the fly.
Being the fly.
And in the meantime, we'll have to make do with a few more bottles of beer and talk more fishing.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have a few more now.
Many thanks, Rob.
Hey, cheers, Ceri.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to listen to more, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you'll get weekly podcasts and access to over 140 episodes, behind the scenes photography to go with each episode, plus other exclusive content and prizes. To become a Patreon, visit patreon.com/casting with Ceri Jones, or you can find the link on my website, castingwithcerijones.com. That's all for now. Tight lines, and may they always be up in the wave.